Andrew.
Hi, Bill. How are you? Good to see you. Hi, Astrid.
Hi, Andrew. FYI, you guys are live. Everyone can see you, so.
Just arrived in the virtual limousine. It was quite nice. Very smooth and easy ride.
Just for you. Did you get some custom EJ water there while you were on the limo?
No, but I will show my ARWO swag that I got. Thank you very much.
Nice.
I should show my, see, I got my Cobank pen.
Nice.
You know, so you got to, take notes of your Cobank pen. So we're doing plugs for our sponsors who we deeply appreciate.
That's right. That's right. Well, I will, it's 3:00 on the dot Central Time, so I'll let you guys go ahead and get started.
Thanks, Astrid.
Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, Andrew, and we're glad to have you speaking. Your partner in crime, George Hawkins, kind of teed a lot of things up. I'm sure you were listening in, and Ron. It looks like Ron's still in the limo. He's waiting to join us here, so we'll be waiting here for one of our other passengers to join us.
Okay.
And I think we've got another passenger. It says here Ron is on his way. He's in happy hour.
I missed that.
Yeah, no kidding. I did too. Here's Ron. There's Ron.
Hello, Ron.
So good afternoon, Ron. And I think, Astrid, aren't we waiting on one more person? David St. Pierre? There's George and David. All right. This is like the Super Bowl. So just so you guys know, I'm very humbled to be. This is like the Super Bowl of people here. So I mean, it's just unbelievable. Minus me, of course. But at any rate, we're so thankful to have David St. Pierre, who I've known for quite some time. I met him over a bottle of wine actually up in Chicago. It was kind of a funny. I think that was a funny meeting, but and of course we've already spoke to George and then Ron Sink. I'm going to go around the table real quickly and have you guys introduce yourselves just to kind of tee up the conversation. And this is always going to be about obviously regionalization and your thoughts, but just to tee up that, and then we'll get into some questions that we've got. So David, why don't you give us a brief bio here.
Well, Bill, I just say that, any meeting with you is a pretty funny meeting. So it's always nice to be with you, Bill. Thanks for inviting me. David St. Pierre, it's great to see the list of people that are here. Water people are my favorite people, and it's great to be here today. I did have the honor of spending time in St. Louis, Atlanta, and Chicago as part of major utilities and being a part of the good things that utilities provide. And now have joined Moonshot Missions. And, I have this side job with a company called Western Technology Solutions. So, in my venture to try to retire, I just keep getting more opportunities. And when I try again, I always end up with another job. So, Bill, be careful. Anyway, thanks for having me, and it's good to be here.
Thanks, David. And George, I know we've talked, I guess briefly, anything that we missed on the first go around, you think? Any funny stories, maybe, how you grew up? I know you grew up in Ohio. I think it was Cleveland area, wasn't it?
I sure did, and my team has gotten more victories in the last this season than probably the last 10 or some horrible statistic. But no, you've heard enough from me. I think you got so many other great voices on this one. I'm just delighted to be there. Dave St. Pierre, when Andy and I, when we were in Moonshot, just so you know, we were thinking of who the best person in all of the country that we could get to join us in Moonshot Mission. On the top of that list was Dave St. Pierre. So we're feeling very fortunate to have him with us. He's done some spectacular things in the utilities he's run, and he's bringing that wisdom to other places. So it's great to have him on this call and to see him.
Okay. Ron Sink with Davidson.
Yeah, good afternoon, gentlemen and panel. And, I'm Ron Sink, General Manager of Davidson Water. We're located in the Piedmont region of North Carolina. Utility, 62,000 connections, 600 square miles, and we have been through consolidation and would be open to do more, but we have obstacles in the way.
Yeah. and our good friend Andrew, a little bit of background, and then I'm going to kind of turn this discussion over to you to kind of tee some things up. I know you got some remarks that you'd like to make, and then we'll tour back to some Q&A. So Andrew, here we'll yield the table to my good friend from New Jersey.
Thanks very much, Bill. First of all, thanks to you for inviting me, and to Astrid for all our technical help, and to ARWO. And it's a pleasure to be on this panel. I totally agree. It's like the Hall of Fame panel. So it's a pleasure to be on the panel with the four of you. I think the world of George Hawkins. He's probably the best water ambassador for water that the country has had, and for many, many years. So it's a great pleasure and honor to get to work with him. And as George said, when he and I were brainstorming who would be the very best person we could ask, we both came up separately, emailed each other at the same time, Dave St. Pierre. So we're so glad to have him as a teammate. It's a pleasure to meet you too, Ron. So thanks very much. My background is that I worked for a wastewater utility in Camden, New Jersey for over 30 years. It was a 80 million gallon per day wastewater treatment plant, 500,000 population, and worked there for over 30 years, and then retired earlier this year, and was very grateful to be able to join George and subsequently Dave, and work with Moonshot Missions, which, as you've heard, is a nonprofit that is dedicated to helping underserved communities with water and wastewater challenges. And our motto is that everyone should have access to safe drinking water and clean waterways, independent of where they live, what they look like, and where their zip code is. So we are striving to disseminate, best practices and information to all utilities, and basically want to serve in the water sector. So thanks for the opportunity to talk about regionalization. My very first assignment when I joined Camden County MUA was to work on a regionalization project. So when I started, Camden County, which is a population of 500,000, it's literally right across the river from Philadelphia. I could look out my window and see the city of Philadelphia. And I'm not going to, I heard George mention sports. Philadelphia is kind of staying away from sports these days. We've had a bad run for the past 3 years or so. But anyway, we're basically a suburb of Philadelphia, and Camden County is comprised of 37 communities. And when I started, there were 52 wastewater treatment plants. All of them were out of compliance with the Clean Water Act requirements for secondary or primary treatment, discharging inadequately treated sewage into the interior streams of the county or into the main river that bisects Camden and Philadelphia, the Delaware River. So the entire county, except for one exception, was on sewer ban as well, because all the wastewater treatment plants were out of compliance. So when I first started, I was tasked with trying to do the planning and get permitting and funding to regionalize the system, because we had done it before I'd gotten there. They had done an analysis to determine what was the most cost-effective approach to upgrade and expand all the treatment plants to meet the new Clean Water Act standards, some of them, or consolidate all of them into one larger treatment plant and then upgrade and expand that plant. And it clearly made sense to eliminate the 52 wastewater treatment plants and take the largest and expand it and upgrade it to meet secondary standards. Give you an idea of what that 52 treatment plant system looked like. It was really ridiculous. There were so many small plants. There were 52 plant managers and 52 sets of teams, all buying equipment, supplies, etc., all within a 30-minute drive of each other. It was maybe an hour's drive at most. It was really silly, and none of them were performing very well. For example, the main stream of the main river in Camden County, interior stream, the Cooper River, was 40% sewage, 40% sewage by volume, and the bacteria levels, the fecal coliform levels in the river, were 10 times higher than what would be result in a beach closing at the New Jersey shore. So basically, what we were able to do is obtain funding through at first the federal grant program and later the state revolving fund program to eliminate each of those treatment plants and build a regional sewer system to convey the flow to the largest plant, the city of Camden's treatment plant, which is right on the Delaware. One of the benefits to doing that was that Philadelphia being on the Delaware, which is a much larger river, only required secondary treatment, whereas the other treatment plants being on interior streams with smaller volumetric capacity would require upgraded tertiary. So significantly cheaper. The other thing was that Camden City had a combined sewer system, a historically old, sort of state of the art for the early 20th century that Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Chicago had CSOs, I think, right, Dave? Yeah. Camden was also one of the early adopters, whereas the suburban communities were separate. So it wouldn't have made any sense to convey a combined sewer system, the flow from a combined sewer system, to a separate system, because you'd have to design for the greater stormwater flow. So it made sense to bring it to Camden, where the combined sewer system already was, and also to be on the Delaware, where you could upgrade only needed to upgrade a secondary. The benefits were incredible. By eliminating those treatment plants, we were able to significantly reduce the total operating costs and of the entire county as a whole. And even what we did was we assumed the remaining capital municipal debt from the sewage treatment plants that we abandoned, so that each of the communities got a significant benefit in loss of debt service. We rolled that into the debt of the regional authority, very much like analogous and a smaller scale to the Alexander Hamilton's idea. I know George is a history buff. Alexander Hamilton's idea of assuming the state debt into the federal debt as a trade-off for the capital being in DC. And so is an analogous on a smaller scale to doing that. So we assumed all the municipal debt on wastewater treatment plants would significantly reduce the cost for those smaller towns, and we're able to roll that in, and it would be offset by the significant operating cost savings by eliminating those 50-odd treatment plants. In addition, we did have to work on a service agreement to among the 37 communities that we were adding, creating this regional authority. But as I said, the cost savings were significant. The capital costs were significant as well. It was the difference between building one regional sewer system and expanding one treatment plant versus upgrading and expanding 52 plants, plus ongoing operations and maintenance was in the hundreds of millions of dollars back in the 70s, and probably in today's dollars closer to the billions. And the water quality improvement was amazing. I mean, of course, it would make sense that if you're no longer discharging raw sewage into small interior streams, that the water quality would improve. But what was remarkable is how fast the rivers returned to optimal standards. How fast nature would restore itself if you let it up. So within 1 year, the fecal coliform levels were reduced by 95 to 99% throughout the stream within 1 year. That's how fast the water quality improved once the raw sewage discharges were eliminated. So that regionalization project was really a great success. Another example of analogous type of thing of sort of public to public partnerships is a shared service agreement. So once our regional authority was established, as I mentioned, we now have 37 customers, the 37 communities of Camden County, one of which, Camden City, was a significantly economically distressed community. Camden, earlier this year, pre-COVID, had median household income of about $26,000. Unemployment rates, again, pre-COVID, 10%, where the national average is like 3%. A lot of poverty. In 2016, in a city of 80,000 people, there were 80 murders. So like 1 in 1,000. So just a very distressed community. And so one of the things that our utility did, again, as a sort of antidote to privatization, was to enter into shared service arrangements with the city of Camden to provide resources that a more regional utility like ours could provide to an underserved community like Camden City. So, for example, Camden qualified for a lot of grant funding or state revolving fund funding, but didn't have any grant writers, or they had one engineer for the whole city. So just didn't have any capacity. So what our utility would do was apply for the state revolving fund funding on their behalf, and getting the also grants that Camden City was available, and utilize that on their behalf to implement projects that reduced, dealt with their combined sewer system, constructed green infrastructure, upgrades that were needed for the general good of the city and quality of life, but also within our wastewater and water nexus. Because it was a regional authority, we couldn't take on those costs for the city. So the city would pay back the loan, but they would be able to get a significantly lower, more advantageous financing than if they were to just call up their bond council and get 5% funding, and then have some private entity do the entire project for them. Or maybe they would not have the capacity to do it at all. So shared services is another example of public to public. A third that George, Dave, and I are working on with Moonshot is a peer-to-peer initiative. The EPA Office of Water, and I know Andrew Sawyers is on the call. It's good to cross paths with him again. The EPA Office of Wastewater, I should say, wastewater management, led by Andrew, initiated a national peer-to-peer initiative a couple of years ago, and Camden was one of the pilots. And what we decided to do for our pilot project was to create a New Jersey statewide water utility peer-to-peer network. And I left my utility in February and joined Moonshot, but I've continued to work with George's and Dave's help through Moonshot, and we're about to launch the New Jersey Water Utility Peer-to-Peer Network this very week, as a matter of fact, in partnership with the New Jersey Association of Environmental Authorities. We have 15 helping utilities, volunteer utilities. The State Department of Environmental Protection, the New Jersey EPA, if you will, has identified 12 environmental justice communities that need help, and we'll be working together, Moonshot and these 15 helping utilities, to provide resources such as asset management, RFPs, procurement assistance, SRF application assistance, technical assistance, et cetera, to these underserved communities, all, again, with the same rubric that, everyone deserves access to safe drinking water and clean waterways, and that underserved communities because they lack the resources, the people that live there are entitled to the same quality of life as everyone else. And so the notion is that helping volunteer utilities who are more resourced can assist them in certain ways, so modeled in a sense the way our utility assists the city of Camden previously. And then lastly, I think one of the best examples of public-to-public partnerships is EJ Water. And I would say that even if Bill Teichmiller wasn't listening, I think with what you guys are doing, Bill, is terrific and really a tremendous way to bring about shared services, consolidated costs, et cetera, rather than every single community or utility in your orbit having to go it alone. It's significantly advantageous to have one entity, especially one led well by someone like you, Bill, to provide common service and common cause and reduce overall costs and get those greater synergies. So those are a few examples of how public-to-public partnerships, again, regionalization, tremendously successful, reduced costs for Camden County residents. The New Jersey Infrastructure Bank calculated that the Camden County residents saved over $500 million in the last 20 years just through the consolidation and regionalization and also cost efficiencies. So that's just over the past 20 years, and that's an ongoing basis. Shared services, especially when a more resource utility can assist a lower resource, lower capacity neighbor. This peer-to-peer initiative that we've started in New Jersey and hope to also advance in Maryland, New York, and California, and hopefully coming soon to other states as well. And then, of course, EJ Water, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that on the panel. So thanks, Bill, for the opportunity to start the conversation off. I'm looking forward to discussing it with my fellow panelists.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. And Ron, I know earlier when you were introduced, I know Davidson started out of kind of a roll-up of 5 utilities, but, I don't know if that's talking about more of that or even your perspective of had that not happened, when you think about, what Davidson's been able to do because of your larger scale. I mean, I kind of look at Davidson Water, shot out of a cannon, if you will, and then all of a sudden it's a larger entity and doesn't fight a lot of these, issues that really plague a lot of small systems. So you kind of got up, we laughingly around here call it crawl, walk, run. And I think Davidson Water went from really crawling right to running. And so I, just kind of walk through your perspective, Ron, how you think that impacted it.
Yeah, we did. And the initial consolidation in the 70s was really easy because we were doing all the providing of the services anyway for the 4 other services. And so, and what motivated or what the driver was the loan amount that Farmers Home would lend. They upped their loan amount, and previously they had a set at $4 million back in the 70s, and so North Davidson Water could not borrow any more money. So other entities popped out. North Davidson Water provided the services, and then when Farmers Home lifted that limit, then we all consolidated. But we were doing the billing service. Now, since we pretty much have a defined service area, what's happened is there's other systems in need that are near us, but they just don't seem to want to let control, and it's hard to get that buy-in. And I would ask Andrew if he could speak to that at some point today. How did you get the buy-in from the system? It was probably a no-brainer because they were so failing they had to. Or is there a difference between having to or wanting to? But as long as they can get money from SRF or whoever, and what we say in North Carolina, the continued band-aiding of small systems is hard to get the regionalization going. And that's what I meant by the obstacles.
Andrew, to that question, I'm sure you had a lot of impediments, so you can talk about that. And another question that popped up too that I missed is how did you handle the rate differentials? Because I'm sure some of the smaller systems had really crazy rates. Others were probably too low, too high. And I'm sure you had to have a strategy to get that all kind of railroaded together, because oftentimes when you start putting things together, it's always this have and have nots. There's like this war. And it seems like oftentimes you can almost have a brush fire start just on that simple subject. So kind of walk us through that as well.
Yes, those are both spot on questions. So there were some people who benefited from it, and others absolutely did not. And so some of them we had to actually take to court to require them to well, I should say that, and the State Department of Environmental Protection was sort of like an amicus, friend of the court, because the issue was that in order to comply with the Clean Water Act, to upgrade these terrible treatment plants, these failing treatment plants that couldn't even meet the secondary standards of tertiary, was so cost prohibitive that the utilities, they didn't really want, many of them didn't want to join our regional authority for the exact reasons that Ron mentioned, because they didn't want to give up local jobs. They wanted to hire local. There were 37 solicitors, 37 engineers. They all and they got to give out the contracts, which remember I'm from New Jersey, the land of the Sopranos. So I mean, there's a lot of they'd like to have the control of the contract. So it was the only reason that they had to go in many cases reluctantly was because the cost of upgrading to tertiary was so exorbitant, so off the charts that it was a choice of bad versus worse. And also the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection wouldn't permit. I mean, they intervened at one point with a couple of the recalcitrant towns and just said that we will not trust you, who could not run a secondary plant well, to run an advanced tertiary plant on such a small sensitive stream. So that was part of it. But what we tried to do is offer some SOPs, if you will, to the communities. Like I said, taking over all the municipal debt. Now, some towns who had paid off their debt thought that were unhappy. It was exactly like the situation with the federal government back in the 18th century. But the idea was that we would take all the municipal debt. So some of the towns that were complaining more were happy with that. We also agreed, and this was really silly, but we agreed that the regional authority would bill each individual customer directly, so that because they didn't want, it would have been cheaper for us to give a bill to the town and have them do it, but they didn't want that because they didn't want to, for political reasons, to add a new bill. So we tried to assist them wherever we could, and also, as a larger regional authority, we tried to assist them, with capacity type issues, like I mentioned with the city of Camden, helping them apply for different things. With regard to the rate, the issue there was very challenging, and especially because if we build by flow, as I mentioned, the city of Camden was the only combined sewer community, and it was the poorest. So the city of Camden would have paid, literally, Camden city residents might have paid like 6-7 times more than a suburban community because of the combined sewer flow contribution. So that's what we ultimately had to go to court on to get permission, and the judge agreed that it would be a flat rate. We would charge a flat rate per household, per equivalent dwelling unit, and everyone would pay it. And there for the most part, it was the suburban communities, basically making up for the combined sewer community. However, there was some equity in that because the combined sewer community, Camden City, was the host community as well. So they didn't benefit from the cost of the regional pipelines bringing the flow into Camden either. They didn't benefit from those capital costs or operating costs. So that was sort of the trade-off. That's helpful.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I was going to park on up to David St. Pierre. In David's career, he's seen a lot of, every utility. You mentioned St. Louis, he mentioned as well as Atlanta and even MWRD in Chicago. And it's this cross section of legacy, it's a cross section of workforce. But there's, one of the things that I'm really always been inspired by is the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Chicago. It was not only the city of Chicago, but it was all 135 suburbs. And I was hoping for the listeners this afternoon that you can kind of, when you think about it, and I guess also to tell the audience, I'm from Chicago, so that's why I'm a little, it resonates to me because I'm like, that's amazing to me, all 135 suburbs in the city, all under one system. But, talk about what that scale does and talk about some of the projects you're able to do, and as well as workforce and technology and because I think it's an incredible story, David.
Yeah, so this whole regionalization idea is really a simple idea. I function very well with simple, and so it's really the concept of together we're stronger. I'm going to say that again because it's so simple, but it's the whole idea of regionalization. Together we're stronger. And when you have, MWRD had a service area that had 5 million customers, and that broad base of customer made the rates very affordable and made the potential for service and input and bringing life to the community that was being served. It just exponential benefit to the community. And when I went to Chicago was kind of an older institution. It was founded in 1889. And it operated pretty much the way that, doctors used to operate. You went to your doctor, nobody questioned the doctor. Everybody just believed the doctor because that was the doctor. Nobody got a second opinion. And Chicago, the utilities mindset was pretty much that way. We're the experts, we have our drawbridge. We really don't want to hear from you, the customer. And, one of the things I was brought in to do was really to get out into the communities that we serve and to find out what services were needed and to really figure out how to help these communities. And like you said, we served 125 of these communities, and so that's 125 different mayors, and including Rahm Emanuel at the time, who thought he was the most important mayor. Although he was just one of the 125 that we served. And, what I found was that, again, together we're stronger. And when we think of regionalization, and you put on a lens for that, it's much larger, actually, than just the water utilities themselves. One of the things that is interesting to me, Bill, when I had the pleasure of speaking to a group of your mayors in your region. When you talked about everybody wanted a backhoe, and yet that town's going to use the backhoe for 2 weeks out of that year, but if those 5 or 6 communities bought a backhoe, they could all afford one, and they could afford an operator. And they could keep that operator busy the whole time doing projects that really needed to get done, whether it was water projects, whether it was park projects, whether it was road projects, whatever they wanted to do. And so, one of the things that we took on in Chicago was stormwater. Chicago had 200-year rain events when I was there, just had one, the month after I arrived. And, in the contract, the president said, "Hey, we just had a 100-year rain event a year ago, so I think you're good." And then, within 30 days, we had another one. And then we got to go on the, what I call the lynching tours to all 125 communities that were very upset because Chicago was flat across the whole region, this landscape. 900 square miles, there's 10 feet of elevation change. So when one home gets hit on a street in a basement backup, 100,000 homes get hit. So it is just traumatic, so carpets were pulled out and people were angry and there just wasn't capacity and there's no drainage in a flat, water flows if there's an elevation change. And if there isn't, it doesn't flow very fast. So Chicago had just taken on stormwater, which really gave us an inroad to really trying to figure out how to help utilities. And originally, Chicago was approaching that by, of course, sending out engineers, doing very good engineering studies. And there was one town, Robbins, Illinois, the poorest town in the suburbs. And he came up with this great design. It was a perfect rectangular hole that held a certain amount of water and protected the town from a 25-year flood event. And it was very expensive. And the other design was, of course, an equilateral triangle, as only an engineer can produce. And when you look at the value of that project compared to all the issues that town needed, which was economics, which was outdoor recreation, which was stores and vibrant community life, housing, it just didn't touch any of those issues. And so we convened a meeting of about 50 different agencies, NGOs, and public agencies, and all came together, and we had hired an architect to come up with a different vision. And this vision included all those aspects. And at that meeting, we really asked the community if together we could be stronger and we could actually, instead of just digging holes all over town in our mission, the design was for this wetland park. It had, park fields, and it had an economic engine station, and it had housing by the metro stop that was needed, and, stores that this town desperately needed, just to really pick this town up in every aspect of what this town needed. And what we found is every agency said, I've got this. Oh, we'll do this. All the federal agencies wanted me to come and talk to all of them, for each agency to say what they could do to participate in a much broader project. Mm-hmm. And I think that really, I tell that story because I think it describes utilities well. We all are trying to do our own thing, and we're so focused on our mission that we forget that there's others around us and there's help. And we forget how to find that help. And if we think of more things, regionalization means, again, all working together and getting more done. We can accomplish not only our water mission at a lower rate because others are participating with their dollars, but we can also become that ignition and that catalyst for the good things that happen in our community. And Bill, you've had so many good stories too along that line where water has become central for growth and inspired so much more. So I'll stop there because that's probably too much time already.
I appreciate that.
A lot of exciting things.
We've got a few questions teed up, and I'll open this up to any of the panelists here. Question here is, can you speak to any kind of wholesaling of services? We at EJ, as an example, we contract serve about 25 other utilities, and kind of curious, your thoughts to that type of concept, because then the individual utility doesn't give up their independent control, because it gets back to Ron's point. He said earlier, he's trying to work with some stakeholders, and just like Andrew said, it's tough for folks to give up that control. And so that kind of elicits fear. Obviously, it's the fear of the unknown. It's also just this risk. I was talking earlier with George, when he was talking about DC Water, you walk into a place and nobody feels confident about making decisions. And when you don't have that confidence, it's just difficult to it feels like if you were to give up a system, it's almost like, there's no turning back. And so I was hoping maybe some of you could talk into the idea of wholesaling services to your neighboring systems and what that might look like. George.
Yeah, I'll just take that one on real quickly. And I'll actually give a strong pro and a slight con. Because as I mentioned in my little presentation, DC Water is a wholesale service provider for several million people in Virginia and Maryland. So that is the model. That has been beneficial to everybody in the transaction. There was no question that we were going to take over the system in different states, county, or which would have been 2 different states and 3 different counties. It just never would have happened.
Hey, George, sorry to interrupt you. I think you're getting a little bit of feedback. David, do you mind muting yourself? Because it might be, yes, we got it. Thank you so much. I'll let you go ahead and finish that question.
Okay. It was a huge advantage to everyone in the process, as it's been described by Dave and Andy. And we didn't have to take over any system. It never would have happened. It may not have been able to happen since we crossed state lines. The only thing I'll say that always makes me pause, there is a utility that I won't mention that is only wholesale. And what I liked about DC Water is that we were retail and wholesale. And by being retail, it keeps us honest. I had to go into people's homes when, like Dave, we had flooding, and worst public meetings I ever went were those. They were sure I had flooded their home and wanted to know what I was going to do about it, when the solution we had was $3 billion. I mean, there's no easy way to solve those 150 years floods that we were getting every other year. You just had another one this past summer in DC. But the retail provision of services keeps you honest at the customer level. And I sometimes worry. I'm not saying an only wholesale system can't do this well. I don't mean to make that point. I just felt that the retail part of our operation kept us really honest, because that face-to-face engagement with customers meant we were always trying to be lean and efficient and communicate well. And there's a few systems I know, I'm sure there's some that do very well, but where I run into a wholesale system where they're separate from that direct customer pressure, and it takes away some of that instinct and need to always be serving your customers well. So I love wholesale. I just think it works best in parallel with some retail.
David has hand up.
Yep.
You got any comments, David?
I would want to speak to that, and I'm going to, have a strong, my experience in Chicago, these 125 communities, except for Chicago itself, had the birth and the depth to take care of their system. I think that George's customers were of a size too, that they had enough resources that they could do a job maintaining their system. The rest of the 124 communities that I served in Chicago had 100 miles of pipe. They couldn't afford a cleaning truck, let alone a crew, and they couldn't use that crew. And so out of those 124 towns, there was probably 2 that did any maintenance work, and there were probably 5 that had a capital program. And so, when I looked at the Chicago region and all that wholesale treatment that was going on for those communities, my heart was broken, because these systems are on the path to failure just because the individual communities just don't have the resources to take care of them. So there is an economy of scale point that you have to get to before you're really going to take good care of that infrastructure. And it's important to consider in that question between wholesale or just let somebody take care of the system.
Yeah, appreciate that. One other question, really talking about, how do you get people's buy-in? You're talking to the neighbor. In this case, like Ron just posed the question, he's talking to a system, in his service area, and they don't want to give up local control. And it's something that we kind of battle. And I mentioned this word of fear. I mentioned this word of, the unknown, not knowing, how do you paint this vision, or how do you paint this clear picture that it's going to be okay? And I know, in prior talks, I know, George, we talked about storytelling, right? Tell the story. I do love the working together, but is it just storytelling, or what do you think the secret sauce is to get that accomplished? And that's a question for anybody. Andrew?
I'll start. I think it's the idea of trying to meet people where they are, find out what their concerns are, what their challenges are, and to the extent, with Dave's situation with 125 mayors, we had 37. It's impossible to please everybody. But the idea was to try to find ways. So, for example, one thing was that they didn't, I mentioned the mayors generally didn't want to add the regional bill onto the municipal bill. So we, said, all right, we'll bill directly then. Now, that was completely political, but I agree with what George said. That was an unintended consequence. but it was better for us to be retail because it did require us to be in the game and deal with customers directly as opposed to just one bill to each of the 37 towns. Or like, we saw that they politically didn't want to lose control of contracts. So if we were working in a particular town, building, let's say, a regional pumping station, we tended to use the municipal engineer that they use. So there were ways to get subs. And we pointed out that, again, what was very helpful was the fact that the alternative to joining was an astronomical cost to meet the new Clean Water Act requirements. That was very helpful. And the other thing was, you don't have to deal with the regulatory agencies anymore. We'll do that for you. We did hire some of the people. We couldn't, obviously we weren't going to hire the operators from 37 towns. That wouldn't make any sense. But we did, try to hire people from the utilities to comprise the new plant personnel. So the idea was to try to at least meet people where they were and address some of the issues. And the other thing is the way the service agreement was negotiated. So one of the things we did put in there was that we would have the option but not obligation to do do work in certain municipalities. So that meant that, for example, we wouldn't necessarily go in and fix something for one town and then go back and charge the other towns. There had to be some sort of consensus, or we had to demonstrate that by making this one repair here, it would lower the overall total cost. So the service agreement was negotiated in a way that gave them some kind of control too. So the idea was to try to give some stops.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And one of the things we try to say around here is to try to, unpack because what we always have found, or at least what we've learned thus far, it always seems like one or two or three issues is, because we always make decisions and I know you guys have all seen that Simon Sinek, thing about the golden circle. He talks a lot of these decisions they're emotional decisions. They're not based on business. They're not based on, that's one of the hardest things I had to learn when I got here 19 years ago. I'd walk in and I look at these numbers or these pro formas and I'm like, well, this is a no brainer. And they'd say, no, we don't want to do that. And you're like, well, you guys are stupid, right? And then I learned long enough that I was the one that was stupid because I wasn't considering really the soft issues, which that's these issues that are always the impediments, is how do you kind of pierce through those things? And so another question to that is, as systems, like in your case, Ron, you're talking to a system, and we've had this happen a couple times to us as well, but they'll try to launch into a kind of a feasibility, what are the other options? And then you've got this independent engineering firm that comes in and I know David, I would love for you to talk into this because David and I just had this conversation like a week ago and I'm like, man, this is like manna that just showed up at your door. You're hungry for like a week and all of a sudden he brings that thirst, you're like, oh my God, that's the answer. But I was hoping you could talk a little bit from the engineering perspective, but I don't know if any of you had that happen where, you're talking about this project and all of a sudden the town says, well, we're going to bring in another engineer. And he or she comes up with this idea. Oh, you can do this. It's going to be $1.5 million. And you already know it's $4 million, right? But they're trying to get the fish on the hook. You're trying to get the fish off their hook onto yours. And so I don't know if anyone wants to talk about that war, but I did want David to kind of talk a little bit about engineering. I thought that was a particular insightful thing for all of us to consider.
Yeah, so I guess this whole issue, engineering. Just to speak directly what you asked, Bill, engineering firms have a very small margin, and of course they're needed in our industry to design systems that are going to stand the test of time. But they have a driver, and that's called billable hours. And what they want to do with the client is win more billable hours. And it doesn't necessarily lead the organizations to the right answer. And so it's very important that you have some other trusted advisor, some other opinion that can counteract that in utilities that aren't sophisticated, because it's too easy to sell them something because they have need. And I'm going to call it the root canal syndrome. If you've ever had a root canal, anybody on the panel had a root canal besides me? Yeah. So, when you have one, you want to shoot yourself because And all these utilities have those root canal issues that they can't solve, that are so overwhelming that they're just a pain to the politician or whoever it is that's responsible for that issue. And if you can come in as that trusted advisor and relieve that, like the dentist can a root canal, the next time you have one, there's no question that you want more of that. And I think, if you're a larger utility and you're trying to gain trust in these communities that are around you, or if you're Moonshot Missions and we're trying to gain the trust of utilities so that we can really help them, you have to identify those root canal issues and you have to relieve that pain first. And once you relieve that pain, then they want to go back to you for the minor pain. They want to go back to you. Well, could you do this too? Oh, well, could you do this too? Because it's really about trust, and it's about proving that you are a trusted person and that you're not out to take them over. You're not out to gain anything from them. You're there to help. And I just think that's key.
Yeah. George, go ahead.
I was just going to add, I wanted to strongly endorse and applaud what Dave just said. And I also want to say it was a lesson that I had to relearn as part of Moonshot Missions, because we sort of have these ideas of technologies, as I described earlier, that we think we can help with based on our own experience and what we've been able to do. And I run the risk, and I ran the risk early on of coming to utility and saying, we have all these ideas for you. And there's an almost natural resistance to that. And what Dave is talking about is, and what we've learned, or I'll just say it for myself, what I've learned is that when you engage with a place and hear what's on their mind, their root canal issues, and maybe offer some advice and help on their issues first. So we're not imposing anything. We're not bringing our stuff. We're helping with something that's on their mind, that opens the door to so many other opportunities. And I don't say this for myself because I'm rarely the one who knows what should be done, but you take smart people who are capable, and sometimes we run the risk of coming into a situation and thinking we have the answers before we've heard the questions. And when we hear the questions and answer those kinds of issues and build the trust, as Dave said, I think the door opens for so much more. So Dave is right on, spot on.
Yeah, Andrew, any comments on that?
Of course, I agree with what George and Dave just said, 100%. Like you asked about a specific example about, so during our regionalization process, there was a consulting engineer that naturally was wanting to stay, wanting to see the municipality stay separate because they would continue to have that client, and the client wanted to stay separate. And the thing is it's as Dave was going through the advantages of consolidation, it is really hard to see a picture where it wouldn't make sense 90% of the time. And so the thing was, they came up with did this study to demonstrate why it would have to be more cost effective for them to stay on their own. But the thing was, is that if you have right on your side, you just have to be careful to find the loophole. And what they ultimately, there were 2 or 3 assumptions that they had made that were completely inaccurate, that once they were pointed out and shown, it actually made the consulting engine look really bad, and of course was paved the way to the municipality joining and they lost the trust of the, talking about a trusted advisor. They lost the trust of that municipality because I think it was deliberate. It wasn't just an oversight. It was so patently obvious to an engineer, but not necessarily to the municipality. So there's kind of things that if you're trying to consolidate, you have to look for and see that there may be some self-serving entities involved that look for those flaws in their logic.
Yeah, I know. Also, too, I may offer this up to just the folks. I know lately, last couple of years, and some of you guys know this, Spring Point Partners, and I know that's one of your folks that support Moonshot Missions. They did a grant to RCAP to basically kind of talk on this issue. And so in Illinois, as an example, those funding has allowed them to hire some folks. And we've been able to use those folks somewhat successfully because they're third party. They're not a utility. They're not an engineering firm. They're paid by a grant. So they come in from the standpoint of a non-for-profit. They're disinterested. And so I think that's important because of this idea of almost mitigating or arbitrating. I don't know what the right word is. And of course, George, you're a lawyer, so I apologize. I'm dancing into things that I don't know anything about. But it's this idea of trying to walk people through what they can't see to things that they can see and trying to almost turn the lights on, but then do it in a safe way. Because part of this issue, one of our good friends that does help here, he calls it exposing people. And when I first heard that, I'm like, oh my God, that sounds horrible, right? But when you think about this idea, exposing and embarrassing and all that kind of stuff, I mean, that's kind of this, that's the flip. We didn't talk about fear, George, and DC water, but that's what kind of goes on. Everybody wants things safe. Everyone wants things secure. And when someone like me walks in with my hair on fire and I start asking why, people are like, what the hell? This guy's nuts, right? And so that's the point. How do you get a trusted advisor? And I think, your words of wisdom, David, with root canal, I do suffer with kidney stones. So I very much know what that pain is, because you want that damn thing to go away immediately, right? Or just chop off my torso, But the point is that I think taking that time and really unpacking, what is the pain? How do we get there? And then building that trust. I think that's really important. So at any rate, just some comments.
I'd love to hear what's going through Ron's head right now, because Ron, the three of us anyway get to sit back and just give advice. You're still on that front line. I'd love to hear.
I'm just glad Bill said torso.
Yeah, I wouldn't say anything else.
But I think I think the political dynamic of it all also. And that's what you run in of the independency. It's all political, and it's all self-control. And ultimately, where the money flows or follow the money trail, that the economic drivers will figure it out. And I truly believe that. And we just we need to be in a position to help that along. And with Arrow, our organization, we're doing a good job in educating the legislatures, USDA, EPA, et cetera, and letting them know of the alternatives that are out there. And I think we'll win the day eventually.
Well, I know we're coming up almost to the top of the hour. And any other words of wisdom or things that we can say to kind of wrap things up, Andrew?
Real quick, I'll just follow what Ron said. Transparency is the key. If you have there you go, EJ Water. Transparency is the key. If you have the facts on your side and you have the right answers, then transparency is what you want. That's your friend. And lastly, I'll say that these public-public partnerships, regionalization, consolidation, EJ Water's cooperative model, shared services, peer-to-peer, there definitely are, I believe, a better alternative to privatization, where you have the private entity that's needs to make a profit, and the public-to-public partnerships where public entities are harnessing private sector efficiency but harnessing to the public good is in my opinion, the best governance model.
I appreciate that. And you guys have no idea. I actually have one of my board members listening in. So you guys are just helping me big time. So
I did get an ARWO bottle.
Yeah, I'm always asking for stuff. They're like, slow down, Bill. And so you guys are just like, I can't get over how helpful you guys are. I'm just kind of kidding you. But at any rate, I do appreciate your comments. And this has been a fun panel. And of course, like I said at the very onset, you guys, to me, are the rock stars of our industry. And so I appreciate you taking time and sharing the stage with you and inspirational thoughts. And certainly if there's any other, comments post this, please reach out to us. I think Astrid's got everyone's contact information, and we can continue to have dialogue. So I want to thank you, everybody, and stay safe. And we appreciate everything.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you guys so much. A few final comments as well. Just a reminder that tomorrow is day 2, so we still have a whole one more day of this fun that we've been having. And we're going to be having Brent Fuel tomorrow for a political update. We're going to be having Dan Kowalski with CoBank on the economic outlook. And we're going to be having Nathan Oley with RCAP. So we're super excited for that, as well as a few sessions with our own Aero team. So make sure to log on for that. And it'll be the same time, 11 to 4 Central. So have a great day. Thank you so much for logging on.
Thanks, guys.